The Hall of Bound Stone had not been opened in 40 years. Isolde stood at the eastern arch where the old servants' passage met the marble of the noble gallery, and she could not feel her hands. The cold had crept into them sometime during the third hour of waiting, and she had not noticed until now, when she pressed her palms flat against the column to steady herself, and felt nothing but a distant pressure where her fingers should have been. Below her, the hall blazed. 800 candles burned along the iron tiers. Banners of every house in the Vreilmark hung from the rafters in a slow, solemn rotation, the silver thread of her own family's crest catching the flame and throwing it back like coin. The lower galleries were packed beyond capacity. Lords she had grown up calling uncle, pack mothers who had once braided her hair, warriors who had taught her brother to ride and her sister to track, and had taught her, the third child, only that her place was to make herself smaller in any room they entered. The naming. She should not have come. Her father had ordered her confined to the south wing for the duration of the ceremony, and the matron of the Omega house had locked her door at sundown with the kind of pitying gentleness that had finally broken her. Isolde had crawled out the window at the second bell, had cut her palm climbing the trellis, and had bled all the way down the servants' stair to this colonnade, where no one would think to look for the family's discarded daughter. She had to see it, with her own eyes. She had to see what her family had chosen. The Vreilhound himself stood on the dais. Her father, tall as a winter pine, his hair gone the color of frost, his great cloak of black sable drawn back from one shoulder to show the silver chain of his rank. Beside him stood her mother, who had once held her in the long sickness of her 10th year, and sung the old harvest songs until Isolde slept. To her father's right stood Brannock, her elder brother, who had sworn at her bedside that whatever happened tonight, he would not let her be erased. He had not looked toward the Omega Gallery once, and in the center of the dais, robed in the pale gray of formal succession, stood Otilde, her younger sister, the chosen heir. Isolde pressed her bleeding palm harder against the column and watched the woman who had been a small girl playing at her feet only 10 years ago receive the silver collar that should have been hers. Otilde's face was solemn, beautiful, lifted toward their father with the practiced grace of someone who had been groomed for this since the day Isolde had presented as Omega instead of Alpha, and the family's plans had quietly, terribly, rearranged themselves around her absence. The Vreilhound spoke. His voice carried without effort, as it always had. By the laws of our blood, by the writ of the 4 packs, by the witness of every house bound to the Vreilmark, I name Othilde of Vreilmark heir to the seat of this family. From this hour her hand carries our authority. From this hour her word carries our weight. From this hour, our line is hers to keep. The hall answered with the long, single note of approval, 800 voices in the throat-deep hum that wolves used when no howl would do. The sound rolled up through the columns and broke against the high ceiling and came down again like rain. Isolde felt the bond line in her chest, the one no one else knew about, snap clean through. She had known it would. She had told herself for weeks that she had prepared for it. But the actual breaking was not what she had imagined. It was not loud. It was not violent. It was a quiet, almost gentle severing, like a thread cut by a kind hand. And in its place came a cold so total that she understood, distantly, that something in her had just died and would not be coming back. She pressed her free hand to her stomach. Beneath the heavy wool of her traveling dress, beneath the bindings she had begun to use only in the last fortnight, the small, hard curve of her secret pressed back against her palm. 8 weeks. Old enough that she had stopped pretending it might still be a mistake of the body. Not yet old enough to show, to anyone who did not know to look. The child of a man no one in this hall knew existed. The child of a meeting she could not explain to herself, let alone her father. The child she had planned, foolishly, impossibly, to tell her family about tonight, After the ceremony, when the hall had emptied and the wine had loosened them, and Brannock had promised, that he would stand beside her when she spoke. She watched her brother now. He was looking at Otilda. He was smiling. Whatever oath he had sworn in her sick room, he had laid it down somewhere between then and now, and he had not bothered to tell her. The Vreilhound lifted his hand. The hum of the hall fell silent at once. There is one matter still to be spoken, before this hall is closed. Isolt's blood went still. You all know that this house has carried for some years a daughter who could not be made to fit the shape of her station. You know that we have given her every patience. You know that we have given her every chance to soften herself into the role her birth allotted her. He did not say her name. He had stopped saying her name 3 years ago, in front of company. In private, he had stopped 2 years before that. Tonight, with the heir named and the line secured, I dissolve the bond of name between this house and the daughter once called Iseult. Let it be witnessed. Let it be carried. Let her be, from this hour, no kin of the Vreilmark. The hall did not gasp. The hall had been expecting this. The only person who had not been told was Iseult herself. Her mother was looking at the floor. Brannock was looking at Otilda. Otilda was looking at their father with the careful blank expression of a woman who has been told exactly what will be required of her and is delivering it precisely. Only one face on the dais turned very slightly toward the Omega Gallery, where Isolde had been instructed to remain that evening. Her grandmother, the old Vreilhound, 81 years old, mostly blind now, kept upright in her chair by sheer will. The old woman's milky eyes did not find Isolde, of course, but her head turned a fraction toward where Isolde ought to have been, and the line of her mouth tightened in something that might have been grief, or might have been warning, or might have been nothing at all. The hall began to empty. Isolde could not move. The cold in her hands had spread up her arms and settled in her chest where the bond line had been, and she stood pressed against the column with her bleeding palm leaving a slow, dark mark on the stone, and she watched her family file off the dais in order of rank, without a single one of them looking up. She had to leave. She had to leave now, before the lower galleries cleared and someone climbed to the upper colonnade and found her here. The matron would already be discovering the empty bed. Her father had not said what would be done with her now that she was no kin, but she did not intend to wait and learn it. She turned. She walked. She did not let herself run until she reached the 3rd stair, and then she ran the way, only the desperate run, with no thought for the noise or the bleeding hand or the child she was carrying. Only the hard animal need to be elsewhere. She ran through the kitchen quarter where the cooks had gone to watch the ceremony. She ran past the herb pantry where she had hidden as a child the first time her father had shouted at her. She ran through the laundry yard where the snow lay gray and trampled, and the sky above the wall was the color of old iron. At the postern she stopped. She had a satchel hidden behind the woodpile. 3 coins she had stolen, one at a time, over 3 months. A change of dress. A flask of the tincture the Omega House matron had taught her to brew for nausea. A small bone-carved figure her grandmother had given her at 5 years old. The only thing in her possession that had not been bought with her father's money. She knelt in the snow and gathered them. Then she pressed her bloody palm flat against the postern wood, leaving the only mark she would ever leave on the house of her birth, and she said, into the dark, in a voice that did not shake because she had used up all her shaking already, "I do not forgive you." And she let herself out into the night. She did not see the figure on the high tower watching her go. She did not see the way his hand closed slowly on the stone of the parapet until his knuckles went white. She did not hear, an hour later, when the bells of the Vreilmark rang the alarm for a missing daughter and her father ordered them silenced before the 3rd stroke. And she did not know, could not have known, that on the dais of the Hall of Bound Stone, beneath the seat where her grandmother had sat, a small folded paper sealed in green wax had been left for the woman who was no longer kin. It would be 3 months before that paper found her. By then, half of what she thought she knew about the night of her unmaking would already be wrong. The fishing village of Kerith had not asked her name. That was the first kindness. The second was the cottage at the spur of the headland, half fallen, abandoned since the storm of the previous autumn had taken its owner, and the village reeve had let her have it for the work of mending its roof. The third was the woman called Mother Jenny, who ran the bone house where the fishermen brought their wounded, and who had taken one look at Isolde's hands and said, "You've set bone before, girl. You'll do," and had not asked another question for 12 weeks. Isolde had given them the name Wren. She did not know why she had chosen it. The name had risen up out of her on the road south, somewhere in the long wet days between leaving the Vrailmark and reaching the coast, and when the reeve had asked her what to call her, Wren was what her mouth had said. A small brown bird. A bird that was easy to overlook. A bird that built its nest where no one thought to look. It would do. The pregnancy had announced itself to the village within a fortnight. There was no hiding it past the 5th month, and Isolde had not tried. She had told them she was a widow. She had told them her husband had been a sailor lost in the autumn storms. She had told them she had come south to be away from the places that reminded her of him. The women of Kerith had nodded and brought her bread and dried fish and a length of warm wool. And the men had not looked at her too long, and that had been the end of the questions. Now spring was trying to come. Isolde, who had been Wren for 3 months and was beginning to forget the difference, stood at the edge of the salt marsh in the slow gray dawn and pulled the last of the winter cress from the cold mud. The basket at her hip was nearly full. The child, now in its 20th week, kicked once against her ribs as she straightened, and she pressed her hand flat against the curve of her belly and waited until the kicking quieted. "Soon," she said, to the child, to the morning, to no one. Not yet, but soon. The bond line in her chest pulled. She froze. It had been doing this for 3 weeks, tugging. A slow, deliberate pulse as if something on the other end of a thread she had thought severed was, very gently, very deliberately, testing the tension. The first time it had happened, she had told herself it was grief. The second time, exhaustion. The third time, the child. By the 7th time, she had stopped making excuses and had only sat very still in the dark of her cottage, with her hand pressed over her sternum and waited for it to stop. It did not stop. It came more often now. And it had begun to come in patterns, in something almost like rhythm, in something almost, terribly, like a person on the other end of it, who had not yet given up. The bond between an alpha and an omega was supposed to break clean when one party severed it. Isolde had been taught this since she was old enough to listen. The break was meant to be merciful. The break was meant to be final. The break, above all, was meant to be honest. This was not that. She turned away from the marsh and started back along the path toward the cottage. The basket bumped her hip. The child shifted, settled. The wind off the water was sharp enough to bring water to her eyes, and she let it, because crying with the wind as an excuse was easier than crying without one. Halfway up the path she saw the rider. He had stopped at the gate of her cottage, a tall horse, black, blown hard, a man dismounting with the careful, slow movements of someone who had ridden through the night. He wore traveling gray, no colors, no crest, but the way he stood at the gate, the way his eyes scanned the cottage and the path and the marsh in 3 deliberate sweeps, told her everything she needed to know about what he was. A wolf, a trained one, a messenger. Isolde set down her basket behind the low stone wall of the field and crouched. Her first instinct was to flee. The boat shed at the far end of the village had a coracle she could take. She had 3 coins still. She could be on the water before the man finished knocking at her door. Her second instinct, which was older and more honest, was to stay and find out what news had come 140 miles south to find her. She watched the man knock. She watched him wait. She watched him knock again, and then walk a slow circle around the cottage, looking at the smoke from her banked fire, at the line of washing she had put out the previous afternoon, at the small marks of habitation that told him the house was not abandoned. He came back to the gate. He did not knock a third time. He sat down on the low stone wall, in plain view of the path, and folded his gloved hands on his knees, and waited. He was waiting for her to come to him. That, more than anything else, told her who had sent him. Anyone who meant her harm would have broken the door. Anyone who meant to take her by force would have set watchers on the path. This man had ridden through the night, found her cottage, and had then sat down on her wall to wait for her, in full daylight, like a guest. Isolde stayed in the field for a long time. The child kicked twice. The sun rose another finger's width. The man on the wall did not move. At last she stood up and walked the rest of the way down the path with her basket on her hip, and her face arranged into the calm, flat expression of a fishing village widow who did not know any tall, gray-eyed strangers and would like to know what one was doing at her gate. The man stood as she approached. He did not bow. He did not need to. "Lady Isolde," he said, "my name is Wren." "Yes," he said, "I know." He waited. She watched him. She did not invite him in, and she did not turn him away. And after a long moment he said quietly, "My name is Kadrin. I served your grandmother for 31 years. I came south because she sent me. She is dying, my lady, and there are things she needs you to know before she goes." Isolde's basket fell. The cress scattered across the path. Neither of them moved to gather it. "My grandmother," she said, "told me nothing my whole life." "She told you nothing because she was watched." Kadrin's voice did not rise. "She is not watched now. She has perhaps a fortnight left. Perhaps less. She charged me, on the night of the naming, with a letter for you and a message for your ear alone. The letter I have carried under my saddle for 93 days. The message I will tell you now, if you will hear it." Isolde's hand had gone to her stomach without her permission. The child was very still. The bond line in her chest pulled harder than it had ever pulled before, as if whoever was on the other end of it had felt the words too. "Tell me," she said. Kadrin took a slow breath. "You were not cast out for the reason you were told. Your father did not name Otilda Heir because she was the better choice. He named her Heir because someone made him. The naming was bought, my lady. It was bought with something so dark that your grandmother has spent the last 3 months trying to hold the truth of it in her mouth without speaking, because the moment she speaks it, she will be killed." Isolde's mouth had gone dry. "Bought by whom?" "That," said Kadrin, "is what the letter tells you, and it is what I have ridden 140 miles to put into your hand." He reached into his coat. He drew out a small folded paper, sealed in green wax, the seal pressed with a mark she had not seen since she was a child. Her grandmother's seal. The old railhound's private mark, used only twice in her life, that Isolde knew of. The first time had been to free a serving girl her father had condemned. The second time had been on a paper Isolde had never seen. This was the third. Isolde's hand shook as she took it. The wax was old now, the green darkened almost to black, but the seal was unbroken. "There is one thing more," said Kadrin, "before you read it." She looked up. "Your father is not the only one who knows you are alive. The man who bought the naming knows too. He has known for 9 days, and he has sent men south to find you before the letter can be opened." Isolde's eyes lifted past him. At the far end of the village path, where the road came down through the cliff cut, 3 riders had appeared. They were not in gray, they were in black. And the lead rider, even at this distance, even with the morning sun behind him, was looking directly at her. The bond line in her chest pulled so hard she nearly fell. "Kadrin," she whispered, "I see them. They are not here for the letter?" "No, my lady." His hand had gone, very slowly, to the long knife under his coat. "They are here for you." The first thing Kadrin did was push her behind him. The second was to whistle. 3 short notes. A fishhawk's call. From the far side of the cottage 2 men came out of nowhere. Men she had not known were there. Men who had presumably been sleeping in her woodshed since before dawn. They moved without speaking. They took up positions on either side of the gate. One of them tossed Kadrin a longer blade, and Kadrin caught it without looking. "My lady," he said low, "into the cottage. The thick wall is the south one. Put it between you and the path. They'll fire the roof. Then they will fire the roof, and you will go out the back into the cliff stair, and you will climb down to the boat at the foot of the rock, and you will row yourself to the seal rocks and wait. The boat is provisioned. The water is in the green skin under the bench. I have been 3 days putting this in place. Go." "You said 3 months." "The letter has been 3 months. The boat has been 3 days. Go, my lady. Now." She went. She stumbled through her own door and pressed her back against the south wall. The unopened letter was clenched in her fist hard enough to crease the wax. Her cottage had 2 rooms, the front where she cooked and slept, and the back where she had hung herbs to dry, and she could already hear the riders coming down the path at a hard canter. Iso had been raised in the Vrelmark. She had grown up in a house full of warriors. She knew, even from inside a fisherman's hovel on a coast 140 miles from anywhere that mattered, what 3 trained killers sounded like when they were committing to a charge. She also knew, with the cold, flat clarity of a woman whose body had spent 20 weeks growing a child while everything else in her life burned, that she was not going to make it to a boat. She would not get to the cliff stair before the first man reached the cottage. She had been a fool to think she could. The child made her slow. The pregnancy made her clumsy. And the cliff stair, in this wet spring with the rocks slick from the morning fog, would kill her and the child in 3 steps. She put her hand on her belly. The child kicked once, hard, as if it had been listening. "Forgive me," she said to it. Then she did the thing she had not done in 6 years. The thing she had been told, by every adult in her father's house, never to do where anyone could see her. The thing that had, in the end, been the deepest reason her father had decided that the daughter born Omega was not the daughter who could carry his line. Isol's family had told the world she was an Omega. That was true, in the way the world used the word. She did not present Alpha. She did not have the strength of an alpha or the dominance of one. She would never lead a pack the way Otilda had been bred to. And in the strict letter of the 4 packs law, she was therefore Omega, and therefore unfit to inherit, and therefore quietly, methodically, set aside. But Isolde was not only Omega. Isolde was something else. Something the 4 packs did not have a name for, because the 4 packs had spent the last 2 centuries pretending it did not exist. Something her grandmother had recognized in her at 5 years old and had taught her, in stolen afternoons, to hide. Isolde could speak to the bones of the dead. Not the way a witch did, with herbs and circles and bargains. The way a wolf did, in the low, silent register beneath hearing, in the part of the world that had been shut to the living packs for so long that most of them no longer believed it was there. Isolde could feel where the dead lay. She could feel which of them had been wronged, and, on the very rare occasions when she let herself do it, she could ask them for help. The dead did not always answer, but the wronged ones did. She knelt on the cold floor of her cottage. She pressed her bleeding palm, the wound from the postern night reopened by her clenched fist on the wax, flat against the boards. She closed her eyes. She let her breath go out slow. And she said, in the silence under hearing, the old word her grandmother had given her at 5 years old. Wake. The cottage went cold. It was not the cold of the morning air. It was the older cold, the cold of long burial, the cold that lived in the bones of the dead who had been left without rest. Iso felt it move up through the boards and into her hand, and along her arm to her chest, where the broken bond line lay coiled like a sleeping animal, and she felt the bond line stir for the first time in 3 months and answer. Outside, one of the riders screamed. It was not a sound a man made willingly. It was the sound of a man whose horse had just shied at something it could see, and he could not. Isolde heard the horse go down, heard the man hit the path, and heard Kadrin's voice bark a command and the thud of a blade meeting bone. She kept her eyes closed. The two who fell at the headland in the autumn storm. She had been gathering kelp when she had felt them, 8 weeks ago. 2 men, drowned, washed up against the seal rocks and never found by their families. Strangers to the village. Their bones lay in the mud at the bottom of the cliff cut, 1/2 mile from her cottage, and they had been very angry to be there. She had told them, at the time, that she was sorry. She had promised them, at the time, that if she could ever do anything for them, she would. She was asking now. The cottage shook. Not the walls, the air. A pressure dropped, like the moment before lightning, and Isolde felt her ears pop and her hair lift from her shoulders, and outside the cottage a second rider made a sound she did not have a word for. Kadrin shouted. The 2 men he had stationed at the gate were shouting too. Steel rang on steel. A horse bolted. Isolde opened her eyes. The room around her was dim. The light from her one window had gone gray, as if a thick cloud had moved across the sun. The herbs hanging from the ceiling were swaying in a wind that was not blowing, and in the corner of her vision, where the back wall met the floor, 2 faint shapes stood with their heads lowered, their hands hanging, watching her. She did not look at them directly. To look at them directly was to ask too much. "Thank you," she said, soft to the corner. "Thank you. Go gently when you are done." The shapes inclined their heads. They did not speak. They did not need to. They turned in the way that the dead turn, which is not turning at all but only being suddenly elsewhere, and they were outside. The screaming got worse. Isolde did not move. Her grandmother had taught her that when the wronged dead were working, you did not look at them, and you did not call them back, and you did not, under any circumstance, leave the place you had asked them from. You sat. You breathed. You waited until they were finished. The third rider tried to ride away. She heard his horse turn on the path. She heard the horse make it perhaps 20 yards. Then she heard the horse fall, and the rider, and a long single note of something that was not a man's voice, and not a wolf's voice, and not, properly speaking, a voice at all, and then silence, then footsteps, Kadrin's, heavy, uneven, alive. He stopped at her door. "My lady? I am whole," she said. "Are you?" "I am cut, not deep." "My lady, what was that?" "Something I owe a debt for now," she said, and she found that her own voice was very far away. "Are they dead? All 3? A pause. "My lady, the things that came out of the marsh, they were not yours, were they?" "They were borrowed." "From whom?" "From the dead." Kadrin did not answer for a long moment. When he did, his voice was different. "My lady," he said, "your grandmother told me, before I rode south, that there were things about you that your father had spent his life forgetting. She told me that when I found you, I should look at you carefully and see what he had not let himself see. I think I begin to understand her now." Isolde opened her hand. The letter, sealed in green wax, lay crumpled in her palm. The wax was cracked, but the seal had held. She stood. Her legs were unsteady. The child shifted, complained, settled. She walked to the small table by the window and she sat down, and she set the letter on the wood between her hands, and she looked at it for a long moment. Then she broke the seal. The paper inside was thin, brittle, written in her grandmother's small hard hand. 3 lines only. "The man who bought the naming was not your father's enemy. He was your father's friend. He has been in this house for 32 years. He stands at the right hand of the Vrail hound. His name is Heidrek of Ostmere. And the child you carry, my dear, is his. Isolde read it twice, 3 times. Her hand went to her stomach, slow, as if the muscles there belonged to someone else. My lady. She did not answer. My lady, you have gone the color of milk. She lifted her eyes from the page. She looked at Kadrin. He was bleeding from a long cut across his forearm, and there were marks of the fight on his face from someone else, and his blade was dark to the hilt. He looked at her with the patient, careful look of a man who had been a soldier long enough to know that what came next was the part that broke people. The bond line in her chest pulled. Hard. Steady. Closer than it had ever pulled before. She heard from the path outside the slow, heavy hoofbeats of a single horse coming up from the village. Not from the way the riders had come, from the other direction, from the south, from the sea. A horse that had, by the sound of its breath, been ridden very hard for a very long way. Isolde stood up from the table. She put her hand on her belly. She walked slowly to the door of her cottage, and she opened it, and she stepped out into the morning light with her grandmother's letter still in her hand. A man was dismounting at her gate. He was tall. He was dark. He wore traveling leathers stained with the salt of long riding. His hair was cut shorter than she remembered, and there was a new scar across his left cheekbone that had not been there the last time she had seen him, and his eyes, the strange pale gray-green of deep water, were fixed on her with an expression she did not have a name for. She had last seen him on a summer night, 8 months ago, in a clearing 14 miles from her father's house, when he had pressed his mouth to the small soft place under her ear and had told her that whatever happened, whatever she heard, whatever she was told, he would come for her. He had come. His name was not Heidrek. His name was Reardon. And he was, by every sign her body could give her, and every line her grandmother's letter had just rewritten, the actual father of her child. He took one step into her gate, and he stopped, and he looked at the curve of her belly under her dress, and his face broke open in a way she had never seen a man's face break. "You're alive," he said. His voice did not sound like his voice. It sounded like a man who had not used his voice in a long time. "You're carrying." She could not answer him. The letter was crushed in her fist. The bond line in her chest, which she had thought broken, which she had thought severed, which she had felt snap in a hall of 800 candles 3 months ago, was singing. "Isolde," he said very quietly. "Whose child is that?" And she realized, with a slow, cold dawning that had nothing to do with the morning air, that he did not know. He thought it might not be his. Someone had told him, somewhere in the last 3 months, that it was not. She could not speak. The letter crumpled in her fist. The bond line in her chest, which she had spent 3 months pretending was dead, sang so loud she could hear nothing else. Reardon stood at her gate with the salt of long riding still on his coat, and his eyes fixed on the curve of her belly, and the question he had asked her hung in the air between them like a blade neither of them had drawn. Whose child is that? She had imagined him 1,000 ways during her exile, furious, indifferent, arriving with another woman on his arm, arriving and not knowing her face. She had not, in any of those imaginings, prepared for the possibility that he would arrive looking like a man who had been told a story so cruel that he had ridden 140 miles south, not to claim her, but to confirm whether the story was true. "Reardon," she said. His name in her mouth did something to him. She saw it. The line of his jaw shifted. His weight came down on his heels, very slightly, as if her voice had pushed him. "Tell me," he said. "Tell me whose." "Yours." The word fell between them. He did not move. He stared at her as if he was waiting for the word to change shape, to become something he could understand without believing. "They told me," he said, slow, "that you had been with another in the autumn. They told me that the child was that man's. They told me you had asked for the naming to be done quietly, so that you could be set aside without scandal, so that your family would not have to publicly name the man who had ruined you. Isolde felt the blood go out of her face. Who told you that? My uncle. His voice had gone flat. 8 days ago. He came to the sea keep. He had a letter. He said he had come to spare me from making a fool of myself by riding north for a woman who had already chosen another man's bed. Your uncle. She tasted the word. Hadrek. Reardon's face did not change, but the air around him did. A pressure dropped, the way it had dropped in the cottage half an hour ago when she had spoken to the bones in the marsh. He had felt it. Of course he had. He was a wolf, and a strong one, and her grandmother's name on his uncle's mouth had just made the shape of his world wrong. Hadric of Ostmere, she said, is my father's right hand. He has been my father's right hand since before I was born. He is the man who bought the naming. He is the man who paid to have me unmade. And he is the man who, 8 days ago, rode to the sea keep and told you a story to keep you from coming for me. Isolde. My grandmother sent a letter. She held it out to him. The wax was broken. The paper was creased where her fist had closed on it. He took it without looking down. He kept his eyes on her face. Read it, she said. He did. She watched him read it. She watched the line of his mouth go thin. She watched him reach the end and read it again. She watched his hand close on the paper slowly, the way a man's hand closes on the hilt of a weapon he is deciding whether to draw. When he looked up, his eyes were no longer the pale gray-green of deep water. They were the color of old ice. My uncle, he said, raised me from the age of 9, after my father's death. He told me, every day of my life, that the Vrailhound was the only friend our house had ever had. He told me that the Vrailmark and Ostmere were 2 halves of one bone. He told me when I came to him last summer and confessed I had met a woman in the eastern wood and could not stop thinking of her, that he was glad, that her father would welcome a match, that I should go slow and quietly, and let him manage the introduction. He said he would speak to my father for you. He said he had spoken to your father. He said your father was pleased. Isolde closed her eyes. 3 months ago, in the autumn, when she had been 7 weeks gone with the child and had finally worked up the courage to write to Reardon and tell him, she had given the letter to Hadrek. She had given it to him because Hadrek had told her, the previous spring, that he had carried letters between her and the young lord of Ostmere all summer and would gladly carry one more. Because Hadrek had smiled at her over the breakfast table the morning after the autumn equinox and had said, he asked after you, child. He asks after you in every letter. I do not think he is going to be content with letters much longer. She had given Hadrek the letter that told Reardon she was carrying his child. She had no way of knowing, until this moment, whether Reardon had ever read it. You did not get my letter, she said. I never had a letter from you. I wrote to you in the autumn. I wrote to tell you. I gave it to him. Reardon made a sound that was not a word. It was the sound of a man absorbing a blow. Isolde, he said. How many letters did you give him? 6. Over the year. He told me he carried them for you. He laughed. It was not a good laugh. It was the laugh of a man who has just understood that his entire life has been arranged by a hand he had thought was his own. I wrote to you, he said, 11 times. Everyone through him. Everyone, he told me, refused. He told me you would not answer. He told me, in the spring, that you had grown bored of the eastern wood. He told me, in the summer, that you had taken another. He told me, in the autumn, that you were with child by that other, and that your family was preparing to set you aside quietly to spare scandal. He told me, 8 days ago, that the naming had taken place, and that you had vanished from the Vrailmark with the man who fathered the child, and that I was to put you out of my mind for the sake of my house. He told my father, she said slow, that I had refused every match he proposed. He told my father last winter that the young Lord of Ostmere had asked for the daughter of the steward of Ensmore instead. He told my father, this past summer, that I had been seen in the eastern wood with a man whose face he did not know, and that perhaps the third child of the Vrailmark was not a daughter who could be made fit for any honorable house. He told us both, Reardon said, the same lie in opposite directions. Yes. For how long? Long enough that my father stopped looking at me. Long enough that your uncle could move the naming without opposition. Long enough that when I disappeared the night of the naming, no one in either house had the information to put together what had been done. The wind off the marsh moved between them. Cadron had gone very still at the gate. The two men he had stationed at the cottage had withdrawn, with the discretion of long-trained guards, to the far edge of the field where they could watch the path without watching the conversation. Somewhere below the cliff, the sea was working at the rocks. Reardon took one step into the gate. May I come closer? Yes. He came. He stopped 2 paces from her. He did not touch her. He looked at her face for a long moment, at the new gauntness of her cheeks, at the place under her eyes where she had not slept in 3 months. He looked at the curve of her belly under the wool of her dress. He went, very slowly, to one knee in the wet path. Forgive me, he said, Reardon. I should have come north when the second letter went unanswered. I should have come north when the fourth letter went unanswered. I should not have believed him in the autumn. I should not have believed him 8 days ago. I knew you. I knew what we had been to each other in the wood. I knew, in my body, that the story he was telling me did not match the woman I had held. And I let him talk me out of my own knowing because he had been the only man in my life since my father died, and I did not want to believe that he had been lying to me for 10 years. Her eyes were wet. She had not realized. Get up, she said. Not yet. Get up. The ground is cold and I am carrying your child, and I will not have the father of my child kneeling in mud while I stand over him. Get up, Reardon. He got up. He still did not touch her. Tell me what you need, he said. She did not know how to answer that. She had been alone for 3 months. She had not had a person to tell her needs to in so long that the question itself was almost too much to absorb. She stood at the door of her cottage with her grandmother's letter in one hand and the other hand on her stomach, and she looked up at the man she had loved for 1 summer and grieved for through 1 winter, and she said the only true thing she had left. Hold me. He moved. He was careful. He was so careful. His arms came around her as if she was something that would break, as if he had not held her in a year and was not sure his body remembered how. She felt his hand spread flat against her back. She felt his other hand come up, hesitate, settle very lightly on the curve of her belly. She felt him breathe, once, deeply, as if he was breathing her in. The child kicked, hard, once. A clean, firm kick against the flat of his palm. Reardon made a sound. She did not know how to describe it. It was not a sob. It was the sound of a man who had been holding something at bay for a very long time and had just stopped holding it. That's mine, he said. Yes. That's ours. Yes. They were going to make me believe it wasn't mine. They were going to make me believe you had thrown me away. They were going to let me grow old with that lie in my mouth so that no one in either house ever asked the questions that would unmake them. Yes. He pressed his forehead to hers. I am going to kill him, he said. Quiet, almost gentle. I am going to ride north, and I am going to put my hand on his throat, and I am going to ask him, before he dies, who else he bought, and how much, and how long. And then I am going to kill him, Isolde. I want you to know this is what I am going to do. I will not lie to you about it. Not yet. Not yet? Not until I know what he bought. Not until I know what my father knew. Not until I know whether my brother is his man or my father's. Not until I know what the naming was actually for. Killing him too quickly is what he would want. He would die with everything he stole from us still standing, and Otilda on the heir's seat, and my grandmother dead in her bed, and we would never know what shape the lie made. Your grandmother is dying. She has a fortnight, Kadrin said. Perhaps less. Then we have a fortnight. Yes. He pulled back enough to look at her. Isolde, I cannot take you north tonight. You are 20 weeks gone, and you have been on your feet too long, and your hands are bleeding, and there is a war in your chest I can feel from where I am standing. Tell me where we go from here. She thought. The bond line in her chest. No longer broken, no longer even pretending to be broken, pulsed slow and clean against her sternum. It was the first warm thing she had felt in 3 months. It was the first true thing. Kareth has been kind to me, she said. But Kareth is no longer safe for me. Hadric will have sent more than 3. The next will be quieter than the first. There is a house, Reardon said. 3 days' ride north, in the salt fens. It belonged to my mother. It is not on any map of Ostmere. My uncle does not know it exists. We can be there before any second party reaches Kareth. From there, we send for your grandmother's word. From there, we plan. 3 days' ride is too far for me. There is a barge at the river mouth. 2 days by water. I have already sent word. You sent word before you knew. I sent word the night I read my uncle's letter and decided, in spite of him, that I would come and see your face for myself before I let any more of him into my mouth. He almost smiled. It was not a happy smile. I am not as faithful a nephew as he believes. Reardon. Yes. There is one more thing in the letter. She unfolded the paper between them. She showed him. He read the 3rd line again, the one she had read 3 times before she had let herself feel it. He went very still. Hadric, he said, told the Vrailhound the child was mine. Yes. And he told me the child was another man's. Yes. And he told your grandmother nothing. My grandmother has eyes. She did not need to be told. Then he has been telling 3 different stories to 3 different houses for a year. To your father, to me, to himself. And the only person in the Vrailmark who knows the shape of all 3 is an 81-year-old woman who, by his hand or another's, will be dead inside a fortnight. Yes. Isolde. His hand tightened, very slightly, on her back. Why? Why what? Why all of this? What does he gain by Otilda on the heir's seat that he could not have got by your match to me? What does he gain by your unmaking that he could not have got by your marriage? Why this much trouble? Why this much lying? Why this much risk? I do not know. Your grandmother does. Yes. Then we go to her. She looked at him. She looked at Kadrin standing patient at the gate. She looked at the cottage that had been her hiding place, and her shame and her small, hard-won life for 3 months, and she let herself, for the first time, feel the size of what she was about to walk back into. Yes, she said. We go to her. The barge was an old salt hauler, broad-bottomed and slow, manned by 4 of Riordan's people who did not ask questions and did not look at her too long. They left Kareth at the 2nd hour of the afternoon with the tide. By dusk they were past the Seal Rocks. By the morning of the 2nd day, they were well into the inland reach of the river, where the marsh grass grew taller than a man, and the only sound was the slap of water and the long, sad call of the bittern. Isolde slept. She had not slept properly in 3 months. The first night on the barge she fell asleep in the small cabin with Reardon sitting on the floor beside the cot, and she did not wake until the gray before dawn. And when she did wake, he was still there, in the same position, and his hand was resting on her hair as if he had not been able to make himself stop touching her even after she had gone under. You did not sleep, she said. I will sleep when we are at the Saltfen house. That is 2 days yet. I have gone longer. She did not argue. She had not had the strength, all morning, to argue. The second day they spoke. They spoke for hours, in the quiet of the cabin while the barge pulled north, and they laid out for each other the year they had each been told a different version of. He told her about the 11 letters he had written, the ones she had never seen. He told her what he had said in them. He told her about the night, in the deep of the past winter, when he had sat in the sea keep with the 8th letter unanswered, and had decided he would ride north in the spring whether his uncle approved or not, and how his uncle had appeared at his door the next morning, 3 days earlier than expected, with a story about her in a stranger's bed. He told her how he had believed it. He told her how the believing had felt. He told her how he had stopped sleeping after. She told him about the Omega house, about the matron who had locked her door at sundown the night of the naming, about climbing out the window, about the bleeding hand, about the column where she had stood and watched her father unmake her in front of 800 witnesses, about the bond line snapping, about the cold that had come in afterward and had not yet, fully, gone. I felt it snap, he said. The night of the naming, I was at the sea keep. I went down on one knee in the great hall in front of 7 of my own captains, and I could not stand up again for a long time. My uncle told them I was drunk. Did they believe him? Some of them. 2 did not. One of them is on the deck of this barge. Cadron said you had sent word before you came south. To 3 of my captains. The 2 who did not believe my uncle, and one I have known since boyhood. They will be at the Salt Fen house when we arrive. Whatever we decide, we will not decide alone. She thought about this. Reardon. Yes. How angry are you? He did not answer for a long moment. At my uncle, he said. More than I have ever been at a person in my life. At your father. Less than I expected. At myself. More than I can yet say. At you. Not at all. I am asking because you have not yet asked me why I did not come south to you. He looked at her. I have not asked you that, he said, because I already know the answer. You did not come south because you believed I had not answered 11 letters. You did not come south because you believed I had stopped wanting you. You did not come south because by the time the naming happened, you had spent 6 months building yourself into a woman who could survive without me, and the body cannot easily unbuild that work in a single night. You did not come south because you were carrying my child, and you did not know whether the man you found at the end of the road would still be the man you had said yes to in the wood. Yes. I would have asked Isolde. If I had known. If a single one of those letters had reached me, I would have left the sea keep at the gallop. I would have ridden the horse to death under me before I let your father unname you. I want you to know this. I want you to know it because I could not save you the night of the naming, and I cannot give that back to you, and I am asking you to let me be the man who stands beside you for everything that comes after instead. The child kicked. She put her hand on her belly. He put his hand over hers. They sat like that for a long time, while the barge moved slow up the river, and the bond line in her chest, which she had felt break and had felt revive, and had felt go quiet in his arms, hummed a low, steady note like a tuning fork that has finally been struck true. The Salt Fen house rose at sunset on the second day. It was not a great house. It was a long, low stone hall set back from the water in a stand of black willow, with a slate roof and 3 chimneys, and a kitchen yard fenced against the marsh cats. Reardon's mother had been born there. His mother had died there. He had not been inside it since he was 11 years old. He had kept it, all those years, by paying a single tenant to live in it and tend its fires and ask nothing. The tenant met them at the dock, an old woman, wider than she was tall, with hands like split oak. She looked at Isolde once, took in the curve of the belly and the bone-white face, and the hand Reardon had set at the small of her back, and she said, I have water hot. I have a bed made. The young lord's 3 captains arrived at dawn. "Come inside, my lady, before the marsh wind does worse than it has." The captains were waiting in the long hall. 2 men, 1 woman. They had all 3 been on their feet when she came in, and they had all 3 gone, very correctly, to 1 knee when Reardon said her name. She had not been knelt to in her life. The Vreilmark did not kneel to Omega daughters. She did not know how to receive it. "Get up," she said. "Please." They got up. She looked at them. The woman was tall, dark-haired, with a long scar across the back of one hand. One of the men was older, gray at the temples, with the calm, unblinking face of a man who had killed often and did not enjoy it. The other man was Cadron's age, with a quick mouth and watchful eyes. "My lady," the older man said, "we have been told what we needed to be told. We have been told the rest can wait until you have eaten and rested. We have been making plans in your absence. With your leave, we will lay them out tomorrow." "Tomorrow," she agreed. She slept again. She slept 12 hours. When she woke, Reardon was asleep on a chair beside the bed for the first time since Kerith, and the morning sun was on the salt fen, and the child was kicking with the kind of persistent good cheer that meant it had decided, in the night, that this place was acceptable. The plans were laid out at midday. The gray-haired captain spoke first. His name was Vance. "We have had a man inside the Vreilmark for 6 days, he said. "A traitor, of a kind we use for this. He says the holding has changed since the naming. The Vreilhound is not himself. He drinks. He does not ride out. He has not held an audience in a fortnight. The lady your mother has not been seen in public for 9 days. The heir, your sister, holds court in your father's place. She holds it badly. The captains of the 4 packs are restive." "And my brother?" Vance hesitated. "Your brother, my lady. Brannock. He has been gone from the holding since the day after the naming. None of the staff know where. The story given to the household is that he is on a hunt in the north. The story given to the 4 packs is that he is touring the border. The 2 stories do not agree, and neither matches the season. Hadrek. Hadrek of Ostmere has been at your father's side every day, without exception. He sleeps in the antechamber of your father's rooms. He does not leave the Vreilmark. He is afraid," Reardon said. "He should be," said the woman captain. Her name was Merith. "He has been telling 3 lies to 3 houses for a year. The lie to the young lord here is broken. The lie to the Vreilhound has not yet broken, because the Vreilhound is too drunk to ask the right questions. And the lie to himself, my lady, is breaking from the inside. A man who sleeps in the antechamber is a man who knows the wolves are coming." "Then we move now." "We do not move now, my lady. Forgive me." Isolde looked at her. "Why?" "Because your grandmother is dying. Because Cadron has sent word that she will not last the fortnight. Because if we move on the Vreilmark before she is dead, Hadrek will find a way to make her death come faster. And we lose the only witness in the holding who knows the full shape of what was done. We need her testimony. We need her, my lady, alive long enough to give it. If we move too soon, we kill her by acting. Then we go quietly. Yes. You and I. Alone." "Not alone," Reardon said. "Not alone, Isolde. 3 of us. Cadron knows the postern. He has known it for 31 years. My lady," Vance said carefully, "there is a thing you should know before you decide." "What?" "Your sister." "What of her?" "Otilda, the heir." Vance's voice was very even. "Our traitor inside the Vreilmark says that since the naming, the lady your sister has been writing letters. Many of them. She writes them at night. She gives them to a single rider, who takes them south. Our traitor has not yet been able to take one, but he has seen enough of her face when she writes them to be certain of one thing." "What thing?" "She is afraid, my lady. She is writing to someone every night in fear. And she is writing in the small private cipher you and she used, as children in the Omega house. Isolde sat down. She had not known her legs were going to give. She sat on the edge of the bench by the fire and she put her hand on her stomach, and she stared at Vance. That cipher, she said, slow, was known only to the three of us. To me, to Otilda, and to my grandmother, who taught it to us. Yes, my lady. My grandmother is dying. Otilda cannot be writing to her. No. Then Otilda is writing to me. Yes, my lady. We believe she has been writing to you, in a cipher only you can read, and giving the letters to a rider who has been instructed to find you. We believe the rider has not yet found you because Hedrick's men have been finding her riders first. How many? 6 riders, my lady, across 3 months. 6. Isolde could not answer. The child was kicking. The bond line in her chest was very quiet, very steady, and very alive. My sister, she said, did not want to be the heir. No, my lady, we do not believe she did. My sister has been trying to reach me for 3 months. Yes? And every time she has tried, Hedrick has killed her messenger. Yes. She looked at Reardon. His face was the color of old ice again. We go tonight, she said. Isolde. We go tonight, quietly. The 3 of us and Marith and Vance and the 3rd captain. We go to my grandmother. We get her testimony. We get my sister out. We do it before Hedrick hears that I am alive and connected. Isolde, you are 20 weeks gone. I know what I am. The ride is hard. The ride is hard either way. The ride is hard in a fortnight when my grandmother is already dead and my sister has already been silenced. The ride is hard in 3 months when I have given birth in this fen, and Hedrick has finished cleaning up every loose end he has not yet tied. The ride, Reardon, is not going to get less hard. We go now. We go tonight. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at his 3 captains. Marith nodded once. Vance bowed his head. The 3rd captain, the young one, said, Horses are ready by sundown, my lord. Sundown, Reardon said. He held out his hand to Isolde. She took it. She stood. The bond line in her chest pulled north. They reached the boundary stones of the Vrailmark at the 3rd hour after midnight on the 4th night. It had been worse than even Reardon had feared. 2 of the river fords were watched. They had gone the long way around, through forest tracks Cadron had known as a young man, and that Mareth had known as a young woman, and which by the grace of 2 woods and 1 foul stretch of bog had not been watched at all. Isolde had ridden a slow, steady horse with Reardon's hand on the bridle for the worst of it. The child had not moved much in the last 2 hours. She had told no one this. The bond line in her chest was no longer pulling. It was steady, anchored, here, like an arrow that has reached the target and stopped. Her grandmother lay 1 league inside the boundary. The old Vrailhound did not live in the great house any longer. She had not lived in the great house since Isolde was 12. She had a small tower at the eastern wall, given to her in the year of her stepping down, where she kept her own books and her own hearth and her own staff of 3 women who had served her for 30 years. The tower had its own gate. The tower had its own well. The tower, as Cadron had pointed out 3 days ago in the Salt Fen house, had its own postern that had not been used in a generation and that Hodrick almost certainly did not know existed. They left the horses with the 3rd captain at the edge of the wood. They went the rest of the way on foot. The postern was where Cadron had said it would be. The wood of the door had rotted slightly at the hinge, and Marith eased it open with a slow, careful hand and a small rag of grease she had brought from the Salt Fen kitchen. Beyond it lay the kitchen yard of the tower, dark, empty, smelling of old smoke and yew. A woman was waiting in the yard. She was small. She was old. She wore a plain gray dress and a white headcloth, and her hands were folded in front of her, and Isolde knew her at once. Eowyn, she breathed. Eowyn had been her grandmother's woman for 40 years. She had also been the one who, in Isolt's 7th year, had sat with her through 3 nights of fever and had taught her, in the worst hour of the 3rd night, the song her own mother had sung to her. She did not embrace Isolt. She did not bow. She inclined her head a fraction, the way she would have inclined her head at the old railhound's gate, and she said very low, "Quickly, lady. She has been waiting since the dusk bell. She did not know when. She knew tonight." They went in. The tower was warm. The lower kitchen was empty and the upper stair was unlit, and they followed Edwin by feel and by the sound of her skirts. At the top of the stair was a small door. Edwin pushed it open. The old railhound was sitting up in her bed. She had not been able to do that for 2 months. Edwin had told them, on the stair. The old railhound had not been able to sit up since the spring equinox. She was sitting up now, propped against 3 pillows, and her milky blind eyes were turned toward the door, and her thin hand was already extended toward the place where Isolde would be standing. "Come here, child." Isolde crossed the room. She knelt beside the bed. She put her hand into her grandmother's hand, and her grandmother's fingers, surprisingly strong, surprisingly warm, closed on hers. "You came." "I came, grandmother." "You brought him." "I brought him." "And the child is alive." "The child is alive." "Then we have until I am done speaking, and not a breath longer." The old railhound's voice had the slow, careful pacing of a woman who had measured exactly how many sentences she had left in her body. "Listen well. Do not stop me. Do not weep. There is no time for weeping yet. There will be time for it after. Do you understand, child?" "Yes, grandmother." "Heydrich of Ostmere came to your father in the 2nd year of your father's lordship. He came as a friend. He came as a young man with no holding of his own. He came with a debt of blood between his father and ours, an old one that I had thought paid. He came, child, with one purpose, and he has held that one purpose for 32 years. He came to take what was ours from inside, because he could not take it from outside. Are you with me?" "Yes." "Hadric has no children. He cannot have them. There is a sickness in the men of his line. He has known this since he was a young man. The Ostmere holding will die with him and his nephew here, child, has a sickness in him too, though it is different and not yet sure. Hadric learned this when his nephew was 19. Do you know what that means?" Reardon had gone very still beside her. "I do not, grandmother." "It means, child, that Hadric's plan was never to put his own blood on the seat of the Vrealmark. He could not. His blood is finishing. His plan was to put the Vrealmark itself under his hand for the years of his own life, and to leave it, when he died, to no one, to break it, to end the line of the Vrealhound and the line of Ostmere together, in the same fall, and to die knowing that the holding which his grandfather lost to ours had been brought down with him into the dark. Do you understand? He wants us erased. He wants the name erased. He wants the line erased. He wants the fact of us erased. He has, at his hand, the means to do it now. Othilde is not capable of holding the 4 packs. He chose her for that reason. Your brother Brennick, who he sent away the morning after the naming, will not return. There will be an accident on the northern border. Your mother has been kept silent for 9 days because she discovered the second part of his plan and tried to write to me, and he intercepted the letter. Where is my mother? In her rooms, drugged, watched, alive, child, for now. And my father. The old Vrealhound's hand tightened on hers. Your father, child, has been drinking from a cup that Heydrich pours for him every night. He has been drinking from it for 6 months. He is not himself. He has not been himself since the autumn. He named you out of the family because Hadric told him you were carrying a stranger's child and would shame the line. He named Othilde Heir because Hadric told him Othilde was the only daughter still salvageable. He was given those words, child, by a man whose hand had been in the wine of the Vrealhound's cup for half a year. Isolde could not speak. There is more. Yes, grandmother. The man Hadric told your father had fathered your child was not a stranger. Hadric told your father, child, that the man was your brother Brannock. The room moved. Isolde heard distantly her own voice make a sound. She heard Reardon's hand come down hard on the post of the bed. She heard Mareth, behind them at the door, swear in a language she did not know. Your father, child, is a hard man and a proud man, and he has been a poor father to you, and I will not defend him. But your father loved his 3 children. Your father's mind broke when Hadric told him what he was told. Your father's drinking, which Hadric had been preparing, became the thing that finished him. The naming was your father's act of grief, child. He was unmaking, in his head, a daughter who had betrayed him with her own brother. He was not unmaking the daughter you actually are. Do you understand the difference? Yes, she whispered. It does not forgive him. No. But it changes what you do next. Yes, grandmother. Brannock is alive. As of 3 days ago, he is north of the boundary, in the high passes, hunting a beast that does not exist on the orders of a father who does not know what he ordered. Hadric's men are with him. They will move on him at the next moon. You have 8 days. Do you hear me, child? I hear you. Othilda has been writing to you in the cipher. She did not want the seat. She has been told, by Hadric, that if she does not perform the heir's duties, he will tell your father that she conspired with you to flee. She is performing. Badly. She is 21 years old, child. She is alone in that house with the man who unmade her sister. She is writing to you every night because she does not know if you are alive and she has nothing else. I will get her out. You will get them all out. Your mother, your sister, your brother, if you can ride fast enough. You will not get your father. Child, your father is past my saving and past yours. The cup has been poured too long. You will know him when you see him. He is not the man you remember. He may not survive the truth of what he has done when he is sober enough to hold it. I will not lie to you about this. Do you understand? Yes. Your young man here. Yes, grandmother. The old frail hound's blind eyes turned toward Reardon. You came when you knew. I came when I knew, my lady. You did not come when you should have. No, my lady. You will spend the rest of your life making that good. Yes, my lady. You will find this difficult. I expect to. Good. Her hand had not moved from Isolt's. Child. The child. 21 weeks, grandmother. Boy. I do not know yet. It is a boy. 2 of them, child. Twins. I felt them in your hand when you first put it in mine. Your mother carried twins once and lost them, and never told you. I am telling you now because it is one of the things I owe you, and there is no more time for owing. Twins. A boy and a girl. The girl will have what you have. What I have. You know what you have, child. You used it 3 days ago in a fishing village. Kadrin told me by bird. The girl will have it. It runs in the women of our line. It skipped your mother. It did not skip you. It will not skip her. You will teach her young, the way I should have taught you young, and you will not let her hide it the way I let you hide it. Do you understand? Yes. Good. A long breath. Now. Grandmother. Now I am going to die, child. Eowyn has the testimony in writing. I dictated it 3 days ago. Her hand and Kadrin's hand both, witnessed before the priest of the Eastern Shrine, who was an honest man before he was a priest and is still an honest man. The testimony names Hadric. It names the cup. It names what was done to your father. It names the lie about your brother. It names the lie about your young man. It will hold in any court of the 4 packs. Eowyn will give it to you when you leave this room. Do not lose it, child. Do not let it be taken. It is the only thing that puts Hadric's neck under the law instead of under your young man's hand. Grandmother, do not weep yet. I am not. You are going to. After. Not now. Now, child, listen. The thing under your sternum. The thing he could not break. Do you feel it? Yes. Do you feel that it is not only him? Isolde went still. It is not only him, child. It was never only him. The bond you carry is older than the boy beside you. It is the thing that runs in the women of our line, and it answers to the bones. And it answered to him because he is yours and you chose him, but it would have answered to no one else, and it will not break for anyone but you. Do you understand? I think I do. You will, child. After. Now. One last thing. Yes, grandmother. The old Vrailhound's hand turned in hers. The thumb pressed, very lightly, into the soft place at the base of Isolde's palm. I am sorry, she said. For all the years I let him erase you in front of me. I should have spoken sooner. I should have spoken when you were 8, and I did not. I am sorry, child. Grandmother. Say you forgive me. I forgive you. Say it again. I forgive you, grandmother. Good. A long, slow breath. Good. Her hand in Isolde's relaxed. The old Vrailhound of the Vrailmark, 81 years old, born in a winter so cold the river had frozen to its bed, breathed out one last time and did not breathe in. The bond line in Isolde's chest pulsed once, hard and then settled, as if something old and heavy had passed through her on its way out. Eowyn, behind her, was already weeping silently. Marith had closed the door. Reardon's hand was on her shoulder. Isolde sat for a long moment with her grandmother's hand in hers. Then, from the courtyard below the tower, in the deep silence of the 3rd hour after midnight, a bell began to ring. Not the death bell. The death bell was slow and heavy and tolled 3 times. This bell was fast. Fast and frantic and wrong. It was the alarm bell of the great house, the one that was rung when the Lord of the Vrailmark was attacked in his own walls. Marith had gone to the slit window. She was already turning back. My lady, the great house is on fire. The east wing. The heir's wing. Isolde was on her feet. Othilde. My lady. Heidrek. My lady. We do not yet know. He knows I am here. He has known since the boundary. He is moving on her now before we can reach her. Marith. Where is the testimony? Eowyn pressed a thick oilcloth packet into Isolde's hand. A second copy, my lady. The original Vance has already taken. It was sewn into his saddle 3 days ago, ready for this moment. He left when the old Vrailhound went still. He is riding south to the eastern shrine. He carries it under his coat. He will not stop. This packet in your hand is your safeguard, in case the first does not reach the priest. Good. Reardon. With you. Cadron. The postern. Now. We go through the kitchen yard and the herb pantry and the laundry stair. I know that house. I lived in it. Othilde will be in her rooms or in the gallery above the Hall of Bound Stone. We split. You take the gallery. I take her rooms. Marith. My mother. My lady. Get her. Whatever it takes. She turned at the door. She looked, one last time, at the bed. She did not weep. She had, as her grandmother had ordered her, not yet earned it. She went down the stairs of the tower at a run, with Reardon 2 steps behind her and the bond in her chest singing like a struck bell. And she went out through the postern her grandmother had kept hidden for 30 years, and she ran across the dark grounds of the holding that had unmade her 3 months ago toward the burning wing where her sister was, in this moment, being killed. The east wing was already half gone. Isolde came up through the kitchen yard at a run that her body should not have been able to give her, with Reardon 1 stride behind her, and Cadron 1 stride behind him. And she saw the flames lick out of the upper gallery windows of her sister's wing in long red tongues that the spring wind was pulling sideways toward the stables. The house staff were in the courtyard in their night clothes. Some of them carried buckets. Most of them stood and stared. None of them, Isolde noticed with a clarity that she would remember later as the moment the last of her childhood died. None of them were running into the burning wing to help. They had been told, by someone, not to. "Kadrin," she said. "The laundry stair." "My lady." "Take Riordan up the back. The heir's rooms are at the end of the long corridor on the second floor. I am going up the servant's way, the one through the herb pantry. I will be there before you. If she is not in her rooms, she is in the gallery above the hall of bound stone. We meet in the corridor. Do not be slow." "Isolde." Riordan caught her elbow. "I should go with you." "You cannot fit through the herb pantry passage. I barely could when I was 12. Go with Kadrin. Trust me." She did not wait for his answer. She turned and she ran. The herb pantry was where she had hidden as a child the first time her father had shouted at her. She had been 6. She had crawled behind the dried lavender and the strings of garlic, and she had found, behind them, a low door in the wall that her grandmother had told her, 2 years later, had been built in the old Vrailhound's own girlhood as a way for the women of the house to move through it without being seen. It came out, 4 floors up, in a linen closet 2 doors down from the heir's rooms. She had not been through it in 9 years. She fit. Barely. The child made her wider than she had been as a girl, and her shoulders scraped the wood on the long climb, and twice she felt the cold dry brush of something living against her ankle, a rat or a bone mouse, and she did not let herself care. The bond line in her chest pulled north and up, hard, steady, and urgent. Otilda was alive. Otilda was alive at this exact second. Isolde had no idea how she knew this. She knew it the way her grandmother had known, on her deathbed, that the child she carried was twins. She knew it the way the women of her line had always known the things their fathers had never been told they could know. She reached the linen closet. She pushed the door open a crack. Smoke. Heat. The hallway beyond was hazed gray, and at the far end of it the wall itself was glowing along the seam where it met the floor. And there were no servants in the hall, and no guards in the hall. And there was, she realized with a slow, cold drop, no one in the hall at all. The heir's wing had been emptied before it had been fired. Isolde stepped out into the corridor and went toward her sister's door at a fast walk, because running through smoke was how you took it into your lungs. The door was closed. She put the back of her hand to it, the way the matron of the Omega House had taught her to test for fire on the other side. It was warm, not hot, not yet. She opened it. The room was empty. The bed had been slept in. The blankets were pushed back. A small wooden chest at the foot of the bed had been opened and rifled. On the writing desk by the window, an ink pot lay on its side, the ink still wet, a quill snapped in 2. Otilda had been taken. Recently, inside the last quarter hour, the bond line pulled. Up. Isolde turned and ran for the corridor. At the far end of it she could hear, under the crackle of the fire, the heavy, uneven footsteps of 2 men coming up from the back stair. Riordan and Kadrin. She let herself feel, for one breath, that they were close. Then she moved. The gallery above the hall of bound stone was 3 corridors away. It was the place where, 3 months ago, she had stood and watched her father unmake her. It was the high private gallery that the women of the family had used in the old days to watch ceremonies they were not permitted to enter. It had a small stair that came down behind the dais. Heidrek would know that stair. Heidrek had been in this house for 32 years. She ran. She was not fast. The child did not let her be fast. But she knew the corridors better than any man Heidrek could have brought with him, and she did not waste a single turn. And she came out at the gallery entrance in time to hear, through the heavy oak door, 2 voices on the other side. One was a man's, low, patient, speaking in a tone Isolde had heard at her father's table all her life. The other was Otilde's, steady, furious, not pleading. Isolde put her hand on the door. She paused. She had imagined, on the 4 nights of riding north, what she would say to Hodrick if she got close enough to say anything at all. She had imagined cold lines. She had imagined hot ones. She had imagined silence. None of them, in this moment, fit her mouth. So she did not say anything. She opened the door. The gallery was long and narrow, lit by the red glow of the fire 2 wings over and by a single lantern set on the rail. Otilda stood at the far end of the gallery with her back to the rail, and her hands behind her, and a thin red line at the side of her throat, where a knife had been laid against her without yet being used. The man standing in front of her, with the knife, was not Heidrek. It was an Ostmere captain. Heidrek himself was 3 paces back from them, in his traveling cloak, with a lantern in his hand and the calm, tired face of a man who had been awake for 36 hours and had decided, at some point in those hours, that he had nothing left to lose. He looked at Isolde. He did not look surprised. "There you are," he said. "I had wondered. Let her go, Heidrek. In a moment. I am going to. I am not going to kill her child. I have not killed any of you. I would like that to be remembered." The fire was set in an empty wing. The captain's blade has been at her throat for the length of 2 breaths, and it will be at her throat for the length of 1 more, and then I am going to let her walk to you. Why? Because I have lost. He said it without weight, as if he were remarking on the weather. Your grandmother is dead. Vance is on the south road with the testimony. Your young man has my head in his hand if he wants it. Brannock, at the next moon, will not be killed. I gave that order an hour ago, by bird, when the Eastern shrine bell rang for your grandmother's death. I am not a fool, child. I have known, since the bell rang, that this was over. Then why are you here? To finish a conversation. With you. One conversation, child, before your young man comes through that door behind you and takes the head I have already conceded. One conversation. After it, you may do as you please. Isolde did not move. The bond line in her chest was very steady. Behind her, in the corridor, she could hear running footsteps coming up fast. Reardon, Cadrin. They would be at the door in 20 heartbeats. Speak then. Send your sister out. No, child. No, Hadrick. I am not stupid. The captain's knife stays where it is until you have said your piece, because the moment my sister walks past me, your hand will be on a second blade, and I am not going to give you the only thing you have left, which is the right to choose how this ends. Speak. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he, very slowly, smiled. It was not a triumphant smile. It was the smile of a man who has watched his opponent across a table for 30 years and has just, at the last move, been beaten by the one piece he had not bothered to count. Your grandmother said you were a clever girl when you were 9. Your father told her she was wrong. Speak. Very well. He set the lantern down on the rail. You think I did this for power? I did not. I have never wanted power. Your young man's uncle, you understand, was a 3rd son. Your young man's father was the 2nd. I was the youngest. There was a 4th child between me and the rest, a sister who died in her 10th year of a sickness our line carries. I held her in my arms when she died. I was 11 years old. I made, that day, a promise about what I would do with the rest of my life, and I have kept it. Not perfectly, but kept it. What promise? That no woman of any house I touched would die in a 10th-year bed. That the sicknesses that ran in our blood would die with us, child, instead of with our daughters. I have spent 32 years, in the Vreilmark, ensuring that the line of the Vreilhound and the line of Ostmere both end with this generation. Not because I hate you, because I do not want one more 11-year-old to hold one more sister. You unmade me. Yes. You drugged my father. Yes. You told my father his son had fathered my child. Yes. You told the man I love, That I had betrayed him. Yes. You sent 6 riders to kill me at a fishing village 140 miles south. 3. The other 3 were hired men. I did not pay for them. I would tell you who did, but it does not matter now. Otilda. I would not have hurt her. You have a knife at her throat. To make you listen, not to use. The knife has been at her throat for the length of 3 breaths. It will not be there for a 4th. He nodded once to the captain. The captain stepped back. The blade left Otilda's neck. Hodrick raised both his empty hands. There, he said. Now your sister walks to you, and I am unarmed, and your young man behind that door comes through, and the conversation ends. I have one last thing to give you, child, before he does. What? Your father. What of him? The cup I have been pouring for him for 6 months. There is a way to undo it. Not all of it. Some. Eowyn has the recipe. I gave it to her 2 days ago. She has not yet told you, because she did not yet know whether I was lying. I was not lying. Your father will not be the man he was, but he will know your face, child, when he sees it. And he will know what was done to him, and he will be able to tell you, in his own voice, that he is sorry. I am giving you that. I owe you that. It is the smallest part of what I owe you, and it is the only part I have left to give. Isolde could not speak for a moment. Why? She said. Why this? Why now? Why give it back at the end? Hodrick looked at her. His face, in the red light from the fire 2 wings over, was the face of an old man. Because, he said, I made my promise about the daughters of houses, child, and you are a daughter of a house, and I have spent 32 years arranging your unmaking, and I have, in the last hour, learned that you are about to be the mother of 2 more daughters of houses, and I will not, at the very end, take from you the one thing your father might still, with help, give you. I am not a kind man, but I keep my promises, even the ones I should not have made. The door behind Isolde slammed open. Reardon came through it at a run. He had his sword in his hand. He saw Hadric standing unarmed at the gallery rail with both hands raised, and he saw Otilda walking, slow, toward Isolde, and he saw the captain on his knees, with his blade laid on the floor in front of him, and he stopped 2 paces inside the door because there was nothing left to do at speed. Hadric looked at his nephew. Reardon. Uncle. You will want my head. I want your head. I have arranged for you to have it. Hadric almost smiled. There is a writ in my coat. Notarized. It cedes Ostmere to you on my death without contest. There is a second writ. It confesses the cup, the riders, the naming, the lie about Brannock, the lie about you, the lie about your lady. It is, between the 2 of them, the cleanest handoff I could draft on 4 nights' notice. Take them both. Take my head. Do it tonight, in this gallery, before the 4 packs wake. Do it before the testimony reaches the Eastern Shrine and a court has to be held, because a court will take a year and the holding does not have a year. Do it now, nephew, as a kindness, and then go and hold your lady's father up while he comes back to himself, because he is going to be the worst part of this for her, and he should not have to be it alone. Reardon did not move. He looked at Isolde. She looked at her sister, who had reached her. Otilda's hand had found hers, the way it had when they were small. Otilda was shaking. Otilda had a thin red line at her throat that would scar. Otilda, 21 years old, who had been writing letters in a child's cipher for 3 months in fear, was looking at Isolde with the face of a younger sister who has, against all expectation, been found. Isolde turned back to Hadric. No, she said. He blinked. No? No. You do not get to choose how this ends. You do not get to die clean in this gallery and leave us with your tidy writs and your kept promises. You stand trial, before the 4 packs. With my grandmother's testimony in evidence and the cup recipe in evidence and my father, when he is sober, in evidence. You will speak every name of every man you bought, and you will name every coin you spent, and you will say, in front of the 4 packs, the words you have just said in this room. About the daughters of houses, about the 11-year-old boy, about the sister who died in your arms. You will say all of it, Hadrek. And then the 4 packs will decide. Isolde, that is a year. Then it is a year. Your father will not last a year. Then he will last what he lasts, and he will spend the months he has left telling, in his own voice, what was done to him. You wanted to undo, Hadrek? Then undo. With your tongue. In the open. In front of every man who served at your right hand for 32 years. Not in this gallery, with a knife and a smile and the conviction that you have, even at the end, kept some honor by it. You have not. The honor is mine to give back to you or not. And I am not. Hadrick was silent. After a long moment he inclined his head. As my lady says. The captain on the floor made a small soft sound, of a man who had expected to die in the next minute, and now would not. Reardon let out a breath that he had, by the sound of it, been holding the entire conversation. He did not lower his sword, but he did, very slightly, ease his shoulders. Cadron, he said. My lord. Take him. My lord. It was done quickly. Hadrick did not resist. He held out his wrists for the cord. He nodded once to Reardon, with something that was almost respect, and he allowed himself to be led out of the gallery and down the back stair toward the cellars where, by morning, he would be in irons and under guard and waiting for the 4 packs to be summoned. Isolde did not watch him go. She had her arms around her sister. Otilda, who had not let herself cry through any of it, was crying now. Hard and silent into Isolde's shoulder, the way she had cried as a small child after the Vrailhound had shouted at her. Isolde held her. She did not say it was all right. It was not all right. She did not say she was sorry. There would be time. She held her sister in the gallery above the hall of bound stone, in the wing of the house where she had been unmade, and she felt the bond line in her chest spread sideways for the first time, out of one channel into many, finding the people it was meant to find. I got your letters, she said, into Otilda's hair. Not the way you sent them, but I got them. Otilda's hand tightened in her dress. You came, she said, muffled, wet. I came. I thought you were dead. I was. I came back. A long pause. Isul. Mother. Marith has gone for her. Mother is alive. Mother will be all right. Listen to me, Otilda. Listen. Brannock is alive. Hadrick called off the order an hour ago. Cadron will send a rider tonight. Brannock will be home before the moon turns. And father? Father is going to know what was done to him. Will he live? I do not know. Otilda nodded, slow, against her shoulder, like a child being told that the fever might turn either way. Isolde lifted her eyes. Reardon was standing 2 paces off, his sword sheathed now, watching them with a look on his face she could not quite read. The fire 2 wings over had begun to die. The house staff in the courtyard were starting, finally, to organize themselves. Somewhere on the south road, Vance was carrying a packet of oilcloth in his coat that was about to break the holding of Ostmere into pieces, and put a man on a stand who would speak, for the first time in 32 years, in his own voice. She held out her hand to him. He came. He stood beside her, and his arm went around her shoulders, and his other hand settled, careful, on the curve of her belly where the twins lay quiet, and he pressed his forehead, very briefly, to the top of her head. You did not let me kill him, he said. Soft, almost a question. No. Why? Because he wanted to be killed. Because dying clean was the last thing he had left to control. Because I am not going to let him have it. That is a hard answer, Isolde. It is the answer I have. He breathed out. Come away from this gallery, he said. please. She came. It was 4 months before her father, sober for the first time in half a year, was strong enough to sit up in his chair and speak to her. He did not look like the Vrailhound she had grown up with. He had lost 3 stone. His hair, frost-colored before, had gone the white of bleached bone. His hands, when she put hers into them, shook. He could not, the first time, get through the sentence he had prepared. He started it 3 times. The 4th time, he wept through it. And Isolde sat on the floor at his feet with her head on his knee, the way she had not done since she was 4 years old, and she let him weep. I unmade you, he said, when he could. In front of 800 witnesses. Yes. On the word of a man I had let into the wine of my own cup. Yes. I am not going to ask for your forgiveness. I do not think you owe it to me. I am going to spend what is left of me trying to be a man whose forgiveness, if you ever wish to give it, would be worth something to receive. Do you understand the difference? I understand. Isolde. Yes. Will you let me see them? The children. They are not born yet. I know. When they are. Will you let me? Will you let me, child? Even if it is once? Even if it is once and never again. Just to know. Just to know that I lived to see them. She had thought, on the long journey back to Ostmere with her sister and her brother, and her bruised and quiet mother, that this was the conversation she would not be able to have. That when her father was sober enough to speak, she would not be able to bring herself to speak to him. That the unmaking was a thing words could not undo. She had been wrong. Yes, father, she said. His hand closed on hers. Thank you, he said. That was all. He did not have more in him. She sat with him until he slept, and then she went, slow, down the long corridor of the great house she had once sworn she would never enter again, and she found her husband, who was not yet her husband, but would be by the autumn, in the small room at the end where he had taken to working in the long afternoons when she rested. He looked up. Well? He asked to see them, she said. And I said yes. He set down his pen. Come here. She came. She sat on his lap, which he had taught her to do despite her loud and frequent complaints that she was too heavy now for it, and she put her face into the curve of his neck, and she let herself for the first time in 9 months cry. He did not say anything. He held her. His hand made slow circles on her back. The twins, who were a fortnight from being born, kicked once, twice in protest at the change of position, and then settled. I am tired, she said, into his neck. I know. I have been tired for a year. I know, my heart. I want to stop. You can stop. Can I? Yes. She lifted her head. She looked at him. The man who had ridden 140 miles south on the wrong story to come and find her. The man who had gone to one knee in the wet path of a fishing village and asked her forgiveness for failing to know better than the lie his own uncle had spent 10 years pouring into his ear. The man who had not let her ride alone into a burning house. The man who had, in the gallery above the hall of bound stone, lowered his sword when she told him to, and had let his uncle live to stand trial when every part of him had wanted otherwise. Reardon. Yes. In the autumn. In the autumn. After the children. After the children. And before the trial. Before the trial. At the Eastern Shrine, where the testimony was sealed. Wherever you choose. And you are going to wear the grey of your house, and not the silver of mine, because I am not going to be married into the Vrailmark again. I am going to marry into Ostmere. We are going to live there. We are going to live in the salt fen house your mother was born in, and we are going to raise our children there, and we are going to come to the Vrailmark only when my father wishes to see them. Do you agree to this? I agree to all of it. Good. Isolde. Yes. You did not let me kill him. No. Are you ever going to tell me in plain words why? The real reason. Not the answer you gave in the gallery. She was quiet for a long time. Because, she said at last, if you had killed him, you would have gone the rest of your life, knowing that you had killed the only man who raised you after your father died. You would have lived with it. You would have carried it. And I did not want our children's father to be a man who carried that. I wanted our children's father to be a man who, when his uncle handed him a clean ending, said no. I wanted him to be a man who chose the long, hard truth instead of the short, kind one. I wanted that for our children. I wanted that for you. I wanted it, Reardon, for me. He was very still. You did not let me kill him, he said, slow, for me. For all of us. Isolde. Yes. I love you. I know, she said. I have known for a year, even when I did not. The twins were born in the autumn, 10 days before the wedding. A boy, dark-haired with his father's gray-green eyes. A girl, fair, with the calm, steady gaze of a child who, even in the first hour of her life, was watching the room. Isolde held them both at once, one in each arm, and she looked at her daughter and she said, very soft, in the old word her grandmother had given her at 5 years old, wake. The girl's small hand opened. A faint warmth moved across the room, like the pressure that comes before lightning, and was gone. Reardon, sitting on the bed beside her, made a small sound. She has it, Isolde said. Yes. I am going to teach her young. Yes. I am not going to let her hide it. No. Do you understand what that will mean, when she is older? I understand. It will not be easy. Nothing about her mother has been easy. I expect to manage. She smiled, for the first time in a long time, the smile of a woman who is being teased by a man who has known her long enough to have earned it. The trial of Heidrek of Ostmere lasted 11 months. He spoke, in the end, every word that Isolde had told him in the gallery he would speak. He named every man he had bought. He named every coin. He named, in front of the 4 packs and the assembled lords of the Vreemark and Ostmere both, the shape of his 32-year promise. And he wept when he came to the part about his sister. And he did not, when the verdict was read, ask for mercy. He was confined, for the rest of his life, to a small house on the northern border, with 2 guards and 1 servant and no visitors. He lived 9 more years. He died by all accounts, quietly, in his sleep, which was a kinder death than Isolde had thought she would let him have, on the night in the gallery, and a harder one than he had wanted, which had been the point. The frail hound lived 3 years longer than the physicians had predicted. He held his grandchildren, twice a season, in the small parlor of the great house. He did not, at any point, ask Isolde to forgive him. She did not, at any point, offer it. They sat together in the long afternoons of his last summer, and they did not speak much, and the not speaking was, in the end, what they had, instead of forgiveness, and it was enough for both of them. Brannock returned from the high passes within the moon, as Heidrek had promised, alive and angry and bewildered. He spent a year being angry. He spent a year after that being sorry. By the end of the 3rd year he and Isolde could sit at the same table without either of them choosing to leave, which was, given everything, more than she had expected. Otilda refused the heir's seat the morning after the fire and never took it back. She came south to live in the Saltfen house for 2 of every 4 seasons, and she taught the twins their letters, and she eventually married, in her 30th year, a quiet healer from the Eastern Shrine who had been one of the witnesses to the old Vreelhound's testimony. Isolde was at her wedding. Otilde wept through the whole ceremony. They both did. The Vreelmark passed, in the end, to Isolde and Riordan's son. He took the name of his mother's house, by his mother's choice, and his father's agreement, and he held it well. The line did not end. Heidrek had been wrong about that. He had been wrong about a great many things, but that, perhaps, was the one Isolde thought of most often In the long years afterward, when she watched her son ride out at the head of the four packs in the silver of the frail hound, and saw in the line of his shoulders the grandfather who had loved him, and the great-grandmother who had refused to let his mother be erased. The salt fen house grew, over the years, into something more than it had been. They added a wing for the children. They added a small chapel by the willow. They added, in the third year, a low stone room at the back of the kitchen yard, which Isolde kept locked and went into alone, on certain nights of the year, to speak to the dead who had once helped her in a fishing village she had never gone back to, and to her grandmother, whose voice she could still, on the long, quiet nights, almost hear. She never went back to Kerith. The villagers there, she heard, still spoke sometimes of the widow called Wren, who had lived among them one winter and had vanished one morning in the spring, and had left behind a small basket of cress in the path, and a cottage with a bloodied palm print on the south wall, which the next tenants had whitewashed over within the season. She let the print be whitewashed. She had her own, by then, on her own walls, in her own house, among the people who had stayed and who had come, and who had been found. On the last night of her life, 61 years after the night of the naming, Isolde sat in the small stone room at the back of the kitchen yard with her granddaughter on her knee. The granddaughter was 9 years old. She had her great-great-grandmother's hands and her great-grandmother's eyes, and her own way of tilting her head when she was about to ask a question she had been saving up. "Grandmother," she said. "Yes, my heart. Tell me again. The night you ran from the great house, the night they made you no kin." Isolde smiled. "They thought they had unmade me," she said. "But I had a child in me they did not know about, and a hand on my back from a long way off, and a grandmother with a letter sealed in green wax, and a power in my chest I had been told to hide. They thought they had unmade me. They had not. They had only, at last, let me go. And you came back. I came back. And you took it all back. No, my heart. I did not take it back. I built something else. The thing they had taken was already broken. The thing I built was new. That is the lesson, if there is one. When they unmake you, you do not have to make yourself again the same. You can make yourself a different shape entirely, a truer one." "Grandmother." "Yes. Was it worth it?" Isolde looked at her granddaughter. She looked through the open door of the small stone room at the long-lit hall of the salt fen house, where her son and her daughter and her sister and her many grandchildren were gathered for the autumn meal she had cooked that morning. She looked at the willow chapel where, 60 years ago, she had married a man in the gray of his house, instead of the silver of hers. She looked at the place on the wall above the hearth where her grandmother's letter, sealed in green wax, hung in a small glass frame, as it had hung for 60 years, the wax cracked but the seal still holding. "Yes," she said, "every hour of it, every hour." The granddaughter put her head on Isolde's shoulder. The bond line in Isolde's chest, which had not once gone quiet in 61 years, gave one slow, steady pulse, and then another, and then, in its own time, settled. Outside, the autumn wind moved through the willow. Inside, the long table was set, and the lamps were lit, and the people who had been found were still, after all the years, there. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.